Hi, I'm Tammy Poor, and this is me reading a letter that I wrote to the Honorable Judge Brenda Gilbert, who presides over the district court in Livingston, Montana, and Park County, Montana. So I'm excited to read this to you because she officiated my hearing for an involuntary commitment to Warm Springs, which is Montana's mental health hospital. And I was so happy to get to go to Warm Springs because I was suffering a serious crisis and I needed help. I was also eager to see Warm Springs and witness firsthand what they did for their clients, their patients, because I've been involved in the mental health industry and served on the Park County Mental Health Board and one of the state mental health boards for years and produced the mental health resource guide for Park County in 2010 and also produced a suicide prevention video, crisis intervention video, and a mental health and happiness guide in 2014. But before I got the online version just about done, but before I got the print version done, I suffered an extreme trauma, extreme crisis, and was denied access to any mental health care. So this is the letter. Without further ado. Dear Honorable Judge Gilbert and Shannon Piccolo. Shannon is the deputy attorney for Park County, and she represented the state of Montana in my hearing. I'm very happy to report back to you both that I've returned to Livingston and am literally happier and mentally healthier than I've ever been. You will remember that I eagerly said that I desired to go to Warm Springs as I had never been there before and have always wanted to meet the staff and experience what they do. Judge Gilbert, your last words to me before I was transported there were get better soon and come back to resume your efforts to create happiness in Montana and Park County. I would like to ask permission to attend Park County Local Advisory Council meetings again. I know it's a public meeting, but I want to ask permission nonetheless. The mission of the LAC is to identify gaps in services, brainstorm solutions, and get those solutions into the hands of the residents of Park County to ensure that Park County residents receive the best mental health care possible. I served on the board as secretary for 5 years and created the first Park County Mental Health Resource Guide in 2010. I also served for 3 years as Park County's representative on the Central Service Area Authority that is Central Montana's Mental Health Board. My job was to report back to the LAC and secure funding for the LAC, which I did. I was also an original member of the Peer Solutions Drop-In Center. I want to report that I spent 2 months in Warm Springs and was released on December 6th to a homeless shelter in Albuquerque, New Mexico. 6 days after being released, I made a serious suicide attempt and spent a week in the ICU at Presbyterian Hospital. Luckily, my children called me right after I had swallowed 250 Tylenol PM and was getting ready to drink the antifreeze, which I had purchased to ensure that the attempt was fatal. Don't worry, I survived. If you will be kind enough to watch the following suicide prevention video that I produced with Carl Rostin, the state of Montana's suicide prevention expert, you will learn that most suicides occur after being released from a mental hospital. I learned firsthand exactly why it is true and feel it is my duty as a Park County resident with lots of experience and knowledge to share the reason with you and many others so that this tragic statistic can change. I want to share my conviction that as a state and county we can enjoy successful outcomes instead of disastrous ones. My educated opinion of why people don't recover and often commit suicide after a commitment to a mental hospital is that the institution has not shifted from a medical model to a recovery model. One of the first things I learned when I was asked to serve on the state and local mental health boards is that the world has been slowly shifting from a dungeon model to a medical model to a recovery model. A recovery model often includes medication, though it often does not. This model includes therapy, peer support, nutrition, empowerment of the individual, and lifestyle changes. Warm Springs offers absolutely no counseling or peer support whatsoever. I witnessed people being left in their rooms to scream and cry for hours, and not a soul gave them any attention. I repeatedly watched large groups of employees that included big security guards storming down the hallways and tackling people to give them shots if they refused medication. I admit that medications are often necessary, especially if there is a threat of violence, but without other treatments, especially empathy and compassion, the patient isn't served in a way that will resolve their issues. I was quickly stabilized, and I developed a friendly relationship with my psychiatrist. He went to my website and told me that he was very impressed with my work. He told me that I would greatly benefit from being on lithium. He even said I would like it. I wanted to object, but I had witnessed that it is not a good idea to object and much safer to be compliant. When blood tests showed that the lithium was destroying my thyroid, he put me on a thyroid medicine instead of taking me off the lithium, which I knew I did not need. I complained of being chilled, and he told me that is a side effect of lithium. My legs started kicking involuntarily every couple of minutes, and I could not sleep. The doctors who treated me at the hospital for my suicide attempt also diagnosed me with lithium poisoning. They discovered that my body was producing extreme amounts of urine and told me they couldn't figure out what was causing it until I told them I was taking lithium. They told me to stop taking it, and it took the whole week to regulate my urine output. When I returned to Livingston on January 7th, I learned that while I was recovering in the ICU from my suicide attempt, one of my very closest friends here in Livingston, Sherry Horvath, committed suicide. That was on December 17th. Sherry and I were best friends and confidants, and I know her story well. Sherry ran the Mountain House Day Treatment Program at Western Montana Mental Health Center for over 11 years, and we served together on the Park County LAC from 2008 to 2014. I've been to her home on several occasions and used to represent her husband's photography when I had my art gallery. It was heartbreaking to learn of her suicide, and I have to tell you something that may have contributed to her decision to take her life. As you know, Shannon, I suffered a very serious mental health crisis in 2014 that landed me in the Park County Jail in solitary confinement for 8 days and another 8 days in general population. I was denied my civil rights while being held in solitary confinement. I've done my research and have proof that putting someone in solitary confinement who is in a mental health crisis is a form of torture and almost always results in suicide. That is why there are jail diversion laws for people in a mental health crisis, and there is more than ample proof that the police and the courts knew that I was in a mental health crisis long before my misdemeanor violation. When I was finally released from jail, totally traumatized by the experience, I went to the Mountain House Day Treatment Center to get empathy from Sherry Horvath, because several of my peers had told me that Sherry had saved their lives. I knew her and trusted her implicitly. We were good friends and were about to become best friends and confidants. As soon as I saw Sherry, I involuntarily burst into tears, started shaking like a leaf, and began squealing uncontrollably, very frightened and very depressed. And in suicidal poverty, I might add. Sherry took me into her office and held me in her arms. She comforted me and promised to help me. She asked me to calm down for her, and as soon as I was able to calm down, I remembered that Experience Works pays people over 55 to work for nonprofit organizations. I got approved to work at Western Montana Mental Health Center as Sherry's second assistant. It wasn't long before Sherry started confiding in me about her saga as a Western Montana Mental Health Center employee, and how Jamie Grunner, her boss, and other staff were plotting to get her fired. The plot against her was confirmed when some of Sherry's clients told her that they had been asked to say defamatory things in writing about her that were absolutely not true. Sherry decided that her only recourse was to quit her job, even though she had a retirement plan that she would have to sacrifice. We both gave our notices, and our last days of serving there was on the same day. She was very traumatized by the experience. I know she got another job, and I heard that she started drinking again before she committed suicide, which you'll see on the suicide prevention video is normal. That happens. It happened to Sherry and it happened to me. I know that people tend to turn to old coping mechanisms when they are traumatized. I'm really sad. I was never able to recover from the trauma I endured during my jail experience in 2014, and as hard as I tried to recover, I ended up making a suicide attempt just 13 days after moving from Livingston to stay with my sister in Florida. I was in a coma in the ICU for a few days. That was the first of 2 suicide attempts that occurred over what happened in Montana. I wasn't upset at all to be involuntarily committed to Warm Springs in October because I know that I was extremely psychotic. And for my sake and the sake of the public, my erratic behavior needed to come under control, and I needed to be restored to sanity. But I did not appreciate at all being taken to Western Montana Mental Health Center in Helena for an evaluation when I was promised I was going to get to see a psychiatrist after having a hallucination where I saw, heard, and felt in the hospital Officer Harris jumping on me and putting his fist next to my face. I was treated horribly by Western Montana Mental Health Center employees in Helena, and they took pictures of my bruises when I got to Warm Springs. They are not trained to treat people in crisis, and I was in a crisis. They made my problem much worse. I've experienced serious abuse by Western Montana Mental Health Center employees many times over a 9-year period and know that it is not just me. A peer of mine who is another longtime client at Western Montana Mental Health Center in Livingston, whose name is Peter, said that he went there absolutely ready to commit suicide one day and was told to go home. I know the person who told him to go home and absolutely believe him. He begged for her to at least call a crisis response team person for him and was told to call them himself. I can relate to the pain and suffering it caused him because I've experienced the same thing. In 2010, I was counseled by Dennis Cox, who was the Community 4 Program Officer for the state of Montana prior to retiring and being replaced by Kenny Bell. He was also a licensed counselor with many years of experience. He was a big supporter of mine. Dennis also supplied an article for the Park County Mental Health Resource Guide at my request about the collaborative mental health system in Montana, that it turns out is not very collaborative. Or to say the least, it's not very helpful. I turned to him in a suicidal crisis, one of many, and he urged me to file a grievance against the head of Western Montana Mental Health Center in Park County and another against the head of the Peer Solutions Drop-In Center, who was also a Western Montana Mental Health Center employee. He told me that what was happening to me was serious abuse and was called the negation of my personhood. It was also the negation of my livelihood. I won my grievances on every single point, and in hindsight, I wish I had sued Western Montana Mental Health Center instead of filing an internal grievance because nothing has changed. So what if I won? If nothing changes, abuse is still the norm and people suffer and die. I have lots of other stories about Western Montana Mental Health Center from former employees and clients. When you start opening up about what's happened to you, it empowers others to open up too. In conclusion, though definitely not final, when you live in a state and a county with almost the highest per capita suicide rate in the nation, you can safely assume that it's because they have not made the shift to a recovery model where mental illnesses are treated, not punished. You can also assume that they have not successfully overcome the stigmas plaguing mental illness and mental health. And you can assume that the legal and penal system have also not shifted into a recovery model and are probably still operating in a dungeon model that punishes and denies civil rights to a person who is in a mental health crisis, which is illegal. Montana taxpayers are paying $300 million a year to operate Warm Springs. It is a gorgeous facility, and it could be a haven of healing if it made the shift to a recovery model. I can absolutely see how easy it would be to make the shift happen quickly. Money does not need to be a stumbling block because there are lots of entrepreneurial ways to raise all the money needed without taxing the already overtaxed citizens of Montana. I served on the Central Service Area Authority with Anita Rossman, the attorney for disability rights, who was also the attorney for the CSAA. When I proposed my ideas for raising money to the board, they all looked at me with glassy eyes, and I thought they were stupid because the concepts were simple and easy to understand. Sorry to use the word stupid. It's not very nice. I should just say unintelligent. Emotionally and intellectually unintelligent. Anita told me that my ideas were great, and the problem from her perspective is that the folks serving the mental health nonprofit industry fight over the same scarce dollars and are very cutthroat. She told me that most of the people serving the mental health industry simply cannot grasp the concept of creating money, only spending it. I do understand making money, and so does my best friend Cheryl Walsh. We have both generated a lot of money publishing magazines all over America in every state. We also both have a core passion for mental health and happiness. We have been practicing nonstop peer support since I've been back in Livingston, and we've also been developing a plan for generating enough money to start a healing center because there is no place for people to go here who are lonely, scared, angry, or depressed, and who are needing socialization and peer support. We want to teach breakthrough modalities that are curing mental illnesses, including nonviolent communication, neurolinguistic programming, strategic intervention, reevaluation counseling, rapid transformation therapy, and music and art therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy is another breakthrough, but that's being taught, at least it was in 2014, by community health partners. So as long as there's DBT in the community. Shara's significant other, Bruce Beckvar, is a master at music therapy, and I am an accomplished singer and songwriter. We also want to teach entrepreneurship and have the center be self-sustained, a for-profit company that is free to those who can't afford to pay and on a sliding scale for others. By teaching entrepreneurship, we hope to help people lift themselves out of poverty. London did a study on the correlation between suicide and poverty, and the link is understandably astronomical. Another study called The Lethality of Loneliness was conducted by the University of Chicago, where they discovered that humans are genetically programmed to behave strangely when they are too lonely, and extremely strangely the more lonely they get. If you watch the suicide prevention video that I did with Carl Roston, he talks about how people who commit suicide and who are suicidal are very lonely. They're very isolated, and they feel like nobody understands them. I knew what was happening to me. I knew about the studies in London. I knew about the studies by the University of Chicago and many others because I stay abreast of mental health and happiness breakthroughs. And I do know what I'm talking about, but I could not get the mental health industry to wake up. Because of the stigma, we are conditioned to avoid and ignore that one who is suffering. I was suffering from suicidal poverty, extreme loneliness, and a broken heart. That the industry I was asked to serve and did serve with all my heart for years did not serve me back. I'm healed now and look forward to a bright and happy future. Trauma has been proven to be the root of almost all mental illnesses, and the good news is that even very severe trauma can be healed, and the person can be cured, or at least their outcome can be greatly improved. Warmly, Tammy Poor.